My name is Brian, and I was standing in the parking lot of a grocery store at 2 in the morning, unloading boxes from a delivery truck, when I saw him, my former manager, the man who had smiled while security escorted me out of the building in front of everyone I worked with. He was getting into a luxury sedan, laughing on his phone, oblivious to my existence. I stood there in my uniform, hands numb from the cold, watching his taillights disappear into the darkness. He didn't see me. He never saw me. That was the problem, and eventually that became his biggest mistake. 3 years earlier, I had a career I was proud of. I worked as a senior analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm that specialized in business restructuring. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, respected, and I was good at it. I had built relationships with clients, mentored junior staff, and consistently delivered results that kept our department profitable. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, but I was reliable. I thought that mattered. I thought competence and loyalty were currencies that held value. I was wrong. The company brought in new leadership. A VP named Marcus who had an MBA from a prestigious school and a resume that read like a highlight reel. He was charismatic, confident, and had a way of making you feel small without ever raising his voice. He came in with his own team, people he had worked with before, and within months it became clear that anyone who wasn't part of his inner circle was expendable. I watched as colleagues were reassigned, sidelined, or quietly pushed out. I kept my head down, worked harder, and told myself that performance would speak for itself. Then my mother got sick. Stage 3 cancer. The treatments were brutal, and she lived alone 2 hours away. I started taking time off to drive her to appointments, to sit with her during chemotherapy, to make sure she ate something other than crackers and ginger ale. I requested flexibility. I asked to work remotely on certain days. I submitted every form, followed every protocol, and tried to balance everything without letting anything slip. But the cracks started to show. I missed a client meeting because I was in an emergency room. I submitted a report late because I had been awake for 36 hours straight. I was drowning and no one threw me a rope. Marcus called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. I remember the smell of his cologne, the way he leaned back in his chair like he was doing me a favor by giving me his time. He told me that my performance had declined, that the company needed people who could prioritize, that my personal issues were affecting the team. He said it calmly, clinically, like he was reading from a script. I tried to explain. I told him my mother was dying. He nodded slowly, hands folded, and said he understood, but that the company couldn't make exceptions. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Maybe this job isn't the right fit for you anymore. Some people just aren't cut out for high-pressure environments." I felt my face go hot. My hands started shaking. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to make him see how wrong he was. But I didn't. I just sat there, silent, humiliated, while he watched me with that same calm expression. He told me I had 2 weeks to transition my projects. I left his office, walked past my colleagues, and locked myself in a bathroom stall until I could breathe again. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. I had to train my replacement, a member of Marcus's team who had half my experience and twice my arrogance. I had to smile and pretend everything was fine while people avoided eye contact in the hallways. On my last day, Marcus made a speech in the conference room. He thanked me for my contributions and wished me well in my future endeavors. It was polite, formal, and completely devoid of sincerity. Then security escorted me out, not because I had done anything wrong, but because it was company policy. I walked through the lobby with a cardboard box in my hands while people I had worked with for years looked away. I sat in my car for an hour after that, staring at the building, feeling like I had been erased. I had given that place years of my life, and in the end, I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry, but I felt something break inside me, something that had held me together for a long time. I drove to my mother's house and told her I had been let go. She held my hand and told me it would be okay, that things had a way of working out. She died 6 weeks later. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I was unemployed, grieving, and completely lost. I applied to dozens of jobs and got nowhere. My savings dwindled. I took a job stocking shelves at a warehouse, then a night shift at a delivery company. I worked jobs that made my body ache and my mind numb, jobs that paid just enough to keep me from going under. I felt invisible. I felt like proof that the world didn't care how hard you worked or how much you sacrificed. I felt like Marcus had been right. But somewhere in that darkness, something shifted. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started feeling something else. Clarity. I realized that the system I had believed in, the idea that hard work and loyalty would protect you, was a lie. The people at the top didn't care about you. They cared about control, about maintaining their position, about protecting their own. And the only way to beat them wasn't to play by their rules. It was to rewrite the rules entirely. I started reading business books, case studies, articles about corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers. I studied how companies were bought, sold, and dismantled. I learned about leverage, about debt financing, about finding weaknesses in organizational structures. I wasn't doing it for fun. I was doing it because I needed to understand how power actually worked. I needed to stop being a victim of it and start using it. I took every dollar I had left and enrolled in an online MBA program. I worked my warehouse job during the day and studied at night. I didn't sleep much. I didn't have a social life. I didn't care. I was building something, even if I didn't know exactly what it was yet. I finished the program in 18 months, then used the skills I had learned to start freelancing as a business consultant. I was cheap, hungry, and willing to do work that other consultants wouldn't touch. I helped small companies restructure their operations, cut costs, and improve profitability. I built a reputation for being ruthless and effective. Within 2 years, I had saved enough to start my own firm. It was small, just me and 2 contractors, but it was mine. I focused on distressed companies, businesses that were failing and needed someone to come in and fix them. I learned how to identify inefficiencies, how to renegotiate contracts, how to cut dead weight without mercy. I didn't do it because I loved business. I did it because I was good at it, and because it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: control. My firm grew. I hired more people, took on bigger clients, and built a track record that attracted attention. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to become the kind of person who couldn't be erased. The kind of person who had options. The kind of person who didn't have to beg for flexibility or mercy. And then, almost by accident, I found the opportunity one had been waiting for. One of my clients mentioned a consulting firm that was struggling. They had lost several major contracts, their leadership was in disarray, and they were hemorrhaging money. The name sounded familiar, but I didn't make the connection until I looked it up. It was my old company, the place that had thrown me away like I was nothing, the place where Marcus still worked. I felt my pulse quicken. I called my client back and asked for more details. The company was quietly looking for a buyer, someone who could absorb their assets and stabilize their operations. The owners were desperate. They were losing money every quarter, and their reputation had tanked after a series of high-profile failures. I did my research. I pulled financial records, talked to former employees, and analyzed every aspect of their business. What I found was exactly what I expected. The company was rotting from the inside out. Marcus was still there, still in a leadership position, still making the same arrogant decisions that had driven away talent and alienated clients. He had surrounded himself with yes-men, people who were more interested in protecting their jobs than doing them well. The culture was toxic, the operations were inefficient, and the financials were a disaster. It was the kind of situation I had built my career on fixing. But this time it wasn't just business. This time it was personal. I put together a proposal. I didn't go through traditional channels. I went directly to the board, the people who actually owned the company, and I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. I would buy the company, absorb their debts, and restructure their operations. I would save their investment and preserve what was left of their brand. But I would do it my way, with full control and no interference. I had the capital, the track record, and the plan. They were out of options. They said yes. The acquisition took 3 months to finalize. During that time, I kept my identity quiet. The board knew who I was, but no one else did. I wanted the deal to close before anyone at the company realized what was happening. I wanted to walk in as the owner, not as someone they could try to block or discredit. And when the papers were signed and the money transferred, I did exactly that. I walked into the office on a Tuesday morning, the same building I had been escorted out of years earlier. The same lobby, the same elevators, the same sterile conference rooms. But this time, I wasn't carrying a cardboard box. I was carrying the deed to the entire operation. I met with the department heads first, the people who reported directly to Marcus. I introduced myself, explained the situation, and told them that there would be changes. Most of them were nervous, uncertain, trying to figure out where they stood. I didn't give them any answers. I told them I would be evaluating everyone over the next few weeks and that their futures depended on their performance, not their politics. Then I asked to see Marcus. He was in his office, the same office where he had told me I wasn't cut out for high-pressure environments. He looked older, a little heavier, but still carried himself with that same smug confidence. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed. I was sharper, colder, more controlled. I sat down across from him and watched as his expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something close to fear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him and said, "Do you remember me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and nodded slowly. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how this had happened, trying to find some angle, some way to spin it. I didn't give him the chance. I told him that I had spent the last few years studying how companies like this one failed. I told him that his leadership had driven away talent, alienated clients, and destroyed morale. I told him that every decision he had made in the last 3 years had been documented, analyzed, and used as evidence of his incompetence. I told him that the board had agreed to let me clean house, and that he was at the top of the list. He tried to defend himself. He said he had been doing his best, that the market had been tough, that he had been following the strategy the board approved. I let him talk. I let him squirm. And then I said the same thing he had said to me years earlier. Maybe this job isn't the right fit for you anymore. Some people just aren't cut out for high-pressure environments. I watched the color drain from his face. I watched him realize that I hadn't just remembered what he said. I had waited. I had planned. I had built something powerful enough to make him feel exactly what he had made me feel. And then I told him he had 2 weeks to transition his projects. I didn't fire him out of cruelty. I fired him because he was a liability, because his decisions had cost the company millions, and because keeping him would have been bad business. But I won't pretend it didn't feel good. It felt like closing a wound that had been open for years. Over the next 6 months, I restructured the entire company. I cut the dead weight, brought in new talent, and rebuilt the culture from the ground up. I renegotiated contracts, streamlined operations, and turned the financials around. It wasn't easy. It required long hours, difficult decisions, and a willingness to be the villain when necessary. But I had learned something important in the years since I had been thrown away. Being liked doesn't matter. Being respected does. The company became profitable again. We started winning back clients, attracting top talent, and building a reputation for excellence. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I was capable, because I had something to prove, and because I refused to let the people who had tried to erase me define my story. But there was a part of me, a quiet, satisfied part, that knew Marcus was watching, that he was seeing everything I had built, that he was realizing too late that he had made a terrible mistake. I ran into him one more time about a year after I had fired him. I was at a conference, networking with potential clients, and I saw him across the room. He was working for a smaller firm, something regional and unremarkable. He looked diminished, like someone who had lost something he didn't know how to get back. Our eyes met for a brief moment and I saw it. The recognition, the regret, the understanding that I hadn't just moved on. I had surpassed him. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. The fact that I was there, successful and unbothered, was enough. He knew it. I knew it. And that was all that mattered. People ask me sometimes if I'm proud of what I did, if I think it was worth it. The truth is complicated. I don't think revenge is something you should be proud of. It's not noble or heroic. It's human. It's the natural response to being hurt, to being humiliated, to being told you don't matter. And sometimes, when the world takes everything from you, the only way to survive is to take something back. But what I am proud of is what I built. I'm proud that I didn't stay broken. I'm proud that I turned pain into power, that I learned how to play the game better than the people who thought they owned it. I'm proud that I proved, to myself more than anyone else, that I was never the problem. The system was. The people in charge were. And when I got the chance, I changed both. I still think about that night in the parking lot sometimes. Standing in the cold, watching Marcus drive away, feeling invisible and powerless. I think about how much has changed since then. How much I've changed. I'm not the same person who begged for flexibility, who believed that hard work would be enough, who thought the world was fair. That person is gone. And in their place is someone harder, sharper, and a lot less forgiving. I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. Because the alternative was staying in that parking lot forever, watching other people live the life I deserved, accepting that I was powerless. And I refused to do that. I refused to let them win. So yes, they humiliated me at my lowest point. They kicked me when I was down, when I was grieving, when I had nothing left. They thought I would disappear quietly, that I would fade into the background like so many others before me. They were wrong. Years later, I didn't just end their career. I became the kind of person they could never be. Someone who earned their power instead of inheriting it. Someone who built something real instead of coasting on credentials and connections. Someone who understood that the only way to survive in a world designed to crush you is to become strong enough that no one can ever do it again. And when Marcus looks back on his career, when he wonders where it all went wrong, I hope he remembers me. I hope he remembers the person he dismissed, the person he underestimated, the person he thought wasn't cut out for high-pressure environments. Because that person didn't just survive. They thrived. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all.